Okay, Rabbi Sai, this week we're learning organ donation. You're the doctor. One person has just died. We have another person right here who needs that kidney, needs that liver, needs that heart, whatever it may be, that retina. Could we go and do a transplant? Could we take it from the dead Yid and give it to the next Yid? Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? Let's find out. At first glance, it seems amazing. What a beautiful mitzvah. This person has passed away, and now we can use his organs to keep 8 people alive. 8 people that are at risk of dying. We keep 8 people alive, and we can help out another 75. We know Pekuach Nefesh is of tremendous importance. V'chai behem. Are we allowed to do this? So at first glance, sounds great. However, there are 4 potential issues that we need to consider. The first issue is the issue of nivel hames. After a body dies, we have to treat it with kavod. We can't go and start cutting it up and taking things away. Surely that's an issur d'oraisa to cut up a dead body. Number 2, there's a chiyuv to bury a dead body. Could I go and take that kidney, that liver, that retina, that heart, that pancreas, and take it from this dead body and put it into a new body? I have a chiyuv kfura. I have to bury that body. Lo yisolin. I'm not allowed to leave it over. I have to bury it. Number 3 is that every dead body is asur b'hana. It's an issur d'oraisa. The body is also b'hana. Am I allowed to go now and use it? Am I allowed to get enough from it? Can I get enough from that new liver, that new kidney, that new retina? Would it be allowed? And the 4th issue, which is actually going to be the biggest issue, is there's the issur of killing, lo tirtzach. When I go and take that organ, when I take that heart, when I take that kidney, when I take that liver from the guy, is he dead yet? Is the donor dead yet at the time that I take it? Am I killing him, or is he already dead? Now, there was an old question about performing autopsies. Are you allowed to perform an autopsy? Let's say there's some sickness, and you don't want that sickness to hurt other people, and therefore we want to go and we want to examine this body that died from this machla, this sickness, and we want to see if we could maybe learn something which will help us be able to fight it and keep other people safe. At first glance, pekuach nefesh, everything except the 3 shloisha averos chamuros are pushed away in front of pekuach nefesh. So the we should be allowed to. It's pekuach nefesh, assuming we're dealing with deadly disease, which is going to be the case, because usually we want to investigate it because this disease killed this guy. So we want to investigate it, pekuach nefesh. And often you're not just looking to save one person, maybe you're looking to save tens, hundreds, thousands of people. Is it allowed? Could we perform that autopsy? Could we start cutting away pieces of this body to figure out what happened? Zokt the Noidim Yehuda and the Chassam Sefer, they both say, no, you cannot do that autopsy. Why not? What's the problem? The problem is that you need the chaylo lefanenu. You need that person who's in the pekuach nefesh state in front of us. You can't just perform it now to get knowledge. And the Chazon Ish goes a step further and says, even if you have people in front of you that have those sicknesses, that are suffering right now, that are in pekuach nefesh situations, for research, it's still not allowed. Because the way of research, medical research, the way that it works is, they don't go and find cures right away. The way that it works is that usually it takes years and years of research until they can actually find a cure. They're not going to have the cure right away. And therefore, since they're not going to have the cure right away, the people that are currently in the pekuach nefesh state probably will not be in the pekuach nefesh state one way or the other by the time that cure is found, because it takes years, and therefore that's not considered chaylo l'fanenu. It's not like we have the sick person in front of us, and therefore the autopsy would not be allowed. Rav Moshe Feinstein goes a step further in explaining as well why it's not allowed. He says, that is like be Mechal Shabbos to go to medical school. Everybody knows the doctor can be Mechal Shabbos to save a life. But nobody says he could go to be Mechal Shabbos to go to medical school, because that would be, once again, an issue of you can't, Pikuach Nefesh doesn't apply if you don't have the Chayla in front of us. Okay. Now, do we have any heterim here? So, Rav Shlomo Zalman says that Nivel Hameis only applies to things that you wouldn't do to a live body. There are things that you wouldn't do to a normal living person. It's things that you're just doing it because it's a dead body. That's Nivel Hameis. So therefore, if you want to take this dead body and put it through an MRI machine, see if there's any trauma to it or anything like that, in a case of necessity, you could. You want to, or once again, a blood test, or to draw blood for a blood test, or to take a little piece of skin to do a biopsy. These are normal things that are done to the living, and therefore, if there's a real necessity, they could be done to a mace as well. That's not Zatur Shamzam, that's not Nivel Mace, if it's something that is normal for the live, and most poskim rely on this. The Aruch LaNer has a different problem. He says, like this, very interesting. I can't use somebody else's resources to help that guy. I can't use dead Yenam's resources to help Yankel. It's dead Yenam's body. And I have no right to go take a piece of his body to help out Yankel. It's the wrong address. Meaning that, what's Pshat in the Aruch LaNer? Seemingly the Pshat in the Aruch LaNer is, yes, I don't have the Isser in front of me, the Ben Adam L'Makim Isser of Nivel HaMeis, but I do have the, and I wouldn't even have the Isser Ben Adam L'Makim of stealing wouldn't be a problem. But the problem is I can't use something which is not mine. I can't ask the mace right now, could I use a little piece of your body to help find the criminal? Could I use a little piece of your body to try to cure this, to try to cure this disease? That would not work. I was thinking maybe the Aruch LaNer wouldn't apply if you're trying to catch the killer of this nifter, because that might be a covered hameis to find his killer. So therefore, that might not be the cheshbon of how could I use Yenam's body to help Yankel. Over here I'm helping the covet of Yenam himself, and therefore that might be allowed. Just for the unacquainted, Yenam is the classic Yiddish Joe Doe name. Okay. Now, fine. Would the Aruch LaNer apply if you got permission before death? Let's say this guy said, sign the donor form. So could I now use his resources to help a different guy? L'chayra, you'd be allowed to. Now what about, instead of taking just an autopsy, a piece of skin, cutting up the body, I want to take a kidney. What would we say? Would I be allowed to take a kidney from this dead Yid, to help another Yid who needs it? Now, I am not focusing on the question of the fourth issue of you may be killing the first donor. I'm not focused on that. I'm focusing on the three issues of Nivel HaMeis, Kfuras HaMeis, and the third Isser, which is that there's Isser Hana on the mace. So would that be allowed? So Lamaisa, the Noidim Yud and the Chassam Sofer seemingly would not have an issue, at least this issue of Nivel HaMeis. Why? The Isser of Nivel HaMeis which they had a problem with, was only one. We didn't have the Chayil Lefanenu. Over here, by a kidney transplant, surely we do have the Chayil Lefanenu. And the Aruch LaNer, seemingly he would still have his problem, unless the guy signed the donor or whatever form, which anyways nowadays legally you would obviously have to have. But you would need permission from the dead guy to take his kidney. But if you had that, the Aruch LaNer would be okay with it. The Minchas Yitzchak says you can't take it. Seemingly he's talking about without permission from the mace, because he says the mace has no chiyuv b'pikuach nefesh. Think about it. I might have a chiyuv of pekuach nefesh and doing things to help this chayla in need. But the mace is not chayiv mitzvah anymore. So the mace has no chiyuv in pekuach nefesh. So the chayra, there's no umdina that says the mace is willing to give up his kidney to help this other guy. Because the whole idea, you can't make these assumptions if there's no chiyuv of mitzvah. And I guess we don't make an umdan and an assumption that this dead yenim is going to go lafnim mashur sadin to give his kidney to save Yaakov, even though he's not mechuyev in mitzvahs anymore. Okay, Lemaisa, most poskim, based on these issues, would allow it. If we could get around that killing issue that I discussed earlier, most poskim would assume that there is enough reason over here, there's enough pekuach nefesh reason, or the side, I guess, to allow us to give a kidney from this dead yenim to Yankel. Now, is there an issue of needing kfura? I really dealt with nivel and mace primarily. What about kfura and getting hana from the mace? So if pekuach nefesh applies, the chayra will matter these asurim as well. But even without pekuach nefesh, we might have ways to be matter the issue of the requirement for kfura and the requirement of and the isser hana. This kidney, this liver, this heart, whose heart is it? Whose body part is it? There's a interesting story brought down in the Moshev Zakanim. I don't know, like probably 1,000 years old, the Moshev Zakanim. It's one of the time of the Bali Tosfos. So he brings a story of there were two guys that got their noses cut off. And they went to the Beryl and Shmerel, got their noses cut off. And they went to the doctor, and by mistake, the doctor went and sewed Beryl's nose onto Shmerel, and sewed Shmerel's nose back onto Beryl. It's pretty wild that the story exists so far back. And, seems like it was going well. Everybody, they both had Jewish noses, I guess, so you could get confused. And then eventually, when Beryl died, Shmerel's nose fell off. So this story seems to show, in some way, shape, or form, that we still, even though Beryl's nose was sewed onto Shmerel's face, we still view it as Beryl's nose. So you see, there's still, from the story, you might be able to induce, there's still a sheikhus of the nose to its original master. All right, interesting story. Actually, the story happened in Long Island like 10, 15 years ago, where a husband gave his kidney to his wife, and then shortly after, a couple years after, the wife wanted a divorce. And the husband sued his wife he said, I want my kidney back. Give me my kidney back. I didn't give you my kidney for you to divorce me. And he wanted to give me my kidney back or give me $1.5 million in its place. L'maisa, he did not get his kidney back and he did not win the lawsuit. I guess the court said that it's her kidney. And now we're going to see what some other shittas have to say on this. So there's a Gemara in Saita that's discussing Arla. It says, let's say you take an Arla branch. You take a branch of a tree that's within its first 3 years, and any fruit that grows from that branch is Aser Midin Arla. Aser Midaraisa. You take that branch and you stick it in to an older tree that is already more than 3 years old. And the way that it works with branches, grafting, etc., they actually connect and they unite. And this single branch becomes part of the greater tree. Now the halacha is, in such a case, the Gemara in Saita says that all the fruit, even the fruit from this branch, does not have the din arla. Why? Because this individual branch is batal to the greater tree. So based on this Gemara, Reb Nosson Kestetner wants to say, and others as well, wants to say based on this Gemara, that kidney is going to be considered part of the new body. That heart is going to be considered part of the new body. And what's significant that if it's part of the new body, what's significant is there's no longer a Chiyav Kfura, and there's no longer Isser Hana. Why? It's not the dead guy's heart. It's not the dead guy's kidney. And if it's not the dead guy's kidney, there's no longer Chiyav Kfura, and there's no longer a Isser Hana. Now, we see this also by the Shevet Yehuda says this as well. Now, this is quite a chiddush if you think about it. First of all, we're being medama, we're comparing trees to people. One could certainly argue that they are not the same. However, I guess if it's the most comparable case in Shas, that's what we have to work with. But still, it's a chiddush to assume that they are the same. Furthermore, what's also a chiddush is that if you think about it for a second, how could it be that we're going to say that arm is now fine because there's no Isser Hana? Once it's attached, there's a time difference. At the time that you cut off that arm from the dead body, you're being over the Isser Hana. Yes, once it's attached, the guy could use his liver and use his kidney. But at the time that you're cutting away, l'chayra, it's a problem. And l'chayra, when the guy dies, that body part at that point is a Chiyav Kfura. And when you attach it into the new body, you have not been mekayim the Chiyav Kfura. But this is definitely debatable. Okay. Generally, we will, in the case of Pekuach Nefesh, we will override these three Isurim. There's enough basis to override them. Now, what about something which is beneficial for the chayla, but it's not going to actually help? He's not in a Pekuach Nefesh situation. One example is they actually take from dead people, they take out the cornea of the eye, and they put it into blind people, into the eye of certain types of blind people, and now these blind people get to regain their sight. Would that be allowed? So, l'cha'ira, you don't have any of the heterim of Pekuach Nefesh. All you have is mechusar eber. Are you allowed to be over Isur D'Oraisa from mechusar eber? No. We generally only allow you to be over Isur D'Rabbanan from mechusar eber, for losing a limb. And therefore, l'chayra, we have three Isur D'Oraisa here. It should be a problem. And by the way, I just want to point out on the side, to my understanding, the cornea of the eye is something that you could take out without killing the donor. And I don't think we necessarily have that issue. So if that's the case, then this is a big discussion, big question. So let's examine the issues. So what about the Chiyav Kfura? How are we going to get around that? So it's actually a machlokes for the Chiyav Kfura. Is it a Chiyav on every last little mashu of the body? Or is it just a Chiyav of Kfura? Some opinions say it's a Chiyav on every mashu. Some opinions say it's a Chiyav Kfura on most of the body. Or some opinions say it's a Chiyav on the whole body, but if something's less than a kazayas of mace, there is no Chiyav Kfura. Now, the cornea of the eye, or the retina, the cornea of the eye, is less than a kazayas. So therefore, there's certainly what to say that there's no Chiyav Kfura, and if there's no Chiyav Kfura, since it's less than a kazayas, we would be able to make, for eyesight purposes, we should be able to be makel. What about Nival Mace? So, the Gemara is a Gemara that brings down a case, without getting too involved in the case, but they wanted to dig up a body. The Yarshim wanted to dig up a body because they wanted to claim that a sale wasn't valid, because the one who made the sale at the time of making the sale, he was still a katan. So the Yarshim suggested they wanted to dig up the body to prove that the one who made the sale, who they were yarshing, was a katan at the time of the sale of the field, and it wasn't a valid sale. And the Gemara paskins that these family members were not allowed to dig up the body. Now there's a machlokes achronim over there. That isser of nivel of mace, of digging up the body for financial gain, was that specific to the family members, or is that true for everybody? So there definitely are shitas that hold, that there are achronim that hold for financial gain. Other people, non-family members, don't have the issue of nivel mace, of digging up the body, and therefore l'chayra we would be able to do it over here, as long as they're non-family members. The idea of the family members is the family members have a greater chiyuv of kavod ha-mace. However, I would point out it's not so simple, because even if it's true that when it comes to digging up the mace, we would allow it for financial gain, l'chayra cutting out the cornea of the eye is a greater degree nivel amace than just digging up the dead body. But that is debatable. I'm not a professor. I'm not a professional on, spookiness and what's bad for the body and all that. But that's what I would assume. There was a story in the old Yerushalayim, in the old Yishuv, that somebody died, and over here in Yerushalayim, they're very quick to bury quickly. And they quickly went and they buried him. After they buried him, the Chevra Kadisha was talking, and they said, right guys, that was Zundel Eichenstein, right? I'm pretty sure it was Zundel Eichenstein. We're pretty sure. We're not. I think so. And they didn't actually fully verify who the nifter was. They just buried him in a rushed move. And now the question was, this Zundel Eichenstein's wife, was his wife able to be married? No, because there wasn't proper edus that he was nifter. So they went to Reb Shua Leib Diskin, and they asked him, what do we do? Could we dig up our good friend Zundel over here, or Suffolk Zundel, because we never actually checked to see if it was him? Is there an issue of nivel and mace to dig him up to see if it was really him, so his wife could remarry? And he's Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin Paskin, you're allowed to for two reasons. One reason is that this is a tzarech gadol ma'od. He said the whole Gemara that said you weren't allowed, that was a financial need. For a financial need, you can't dig up a mace. But for tzarech gadol ma'od b'mater aguna, then you would be allowed to dig up the mace. And he said there's another reason, that the husband has a responsibility to allow his wife to get remarried. So even though good old Zundel was dead, he still had the responsibility to his wife, and therefore there would be no problem to dig him up to prove that is his wife. So one could argue that when it comes to, and I think it's a pretty pashut argument, if it's coming to cure somebody from blindness, to be able to use his cornea for the we wouldn't have the issue of nivel amace, because if nivel amace is mutter based on Yeshua Leib Diskin for a tzarech gadol ma'od to matter aguna, I would, once again, this is debatable, but one could certainly argue that surely it's a tzarech gadol ma'od to be matter blindness, and therefore the argument could surely be made that we could take the cornea off this dead body. Though, as I pointed out before, and I'll point out again, one could be mechal and say that it's a greater level nivel amace, cutting away the cornea of the eye of the nifter, than it is just time to dig him up. But once again, I don't know these things so well, what's worse for a mace and what's better for a mace, but I could hear the argument. Okay, now, what about the Isser Hana? So, by the way, also I want to point out that the Shol Meshav says the same svara of for tzarech gadol ma'od we would be allowed to, even though for financial need we can't. For tzarech gadol ma'od, once again, tzarech hima qualifies, we'd be allowed. Nivel and mace won't apply. But once again, the Shol Meshav actually presented in more of a klolistic way, so it might even be a greater raya that we would be allowed to take the cornea of the eye from the mace to restore somebody's eyesight. Now, regarding the Isser Hana, a dead body has Isser Hana, so how are we allowed to use that cornea? How will this blind guy, now that he has his sight back, be allowed to use the cornea? It's Asr Hana using that cornea. So for that, we could apply the Shevet Yehuda that we discussed earlier, that it becomes part of the new person. It's no longer Misyachas to the dead guy. It's now a batal and becomes a chelek of the body of the guy who used to be blind. And Memela, we could argue that the Isser Hana doesn't apply. Now, once again, there's two. That's a chiddush. You could easily hear somebody argue and say, even if it's batal, but how could you take it from the body of this dead guy and insert it into the body of the blind guy? Surely that's usher. Because how could you take it? It's usher ba'ana. Even if the taitza'ah, the end result is it's going to be part of his body, and the using it might be mutter, but the cutting away and inserting it might be a problem. Maybe if you get a guy to do it, I don't know. It's a little difficult, but l'chayr there's what to potentially rely on with that. Now Rav Ovadia has a chiddush. He has a chiddush, and he wants to say somebody who's blind in both eyes, you would be allowed to go cut away the cornea and use it. Why? He says, we know Suma Chashiv Kames. So he is dead. And now when you restore his eyesight, you're making him alive. And this fits into the heter of Pekuach Nefesh. And there's no Isser Nival Meis B'Makom Pekuach Nefesh. Quite a chiddush. So I decided maybe I want to apply the Rav Ovadia, because Ani Chashiv Kames. So it's Pekuach Nefesh. So maybe I could be overall assume the Torah to make myself a usher. I know some people that hold to this Indian. Okay, so it's tzarchid. It's my kash on Rav Ovadia, but listen, I'll leave that as tzarchin. Or maybe some people passing like this l'maisa, as I think we all know them. Okay. Well, you got to be down l'kav schus in all interesting ways, no? Everybody has their own mahalach and down l'kav schus, huh? Well, you think they were just stam stealing, and it couldn't be. Okay, fine. Now, Beseder. The Rav Isser Yehuda Utterman, he is matter this because he says being blind is pekuach nefesh. It's dangerous to be blind. You get hit by a car, you fall down steps. I don't know, it's a very dangerous matzav to be in, to be blind, and therefore you have the heter pekuach nefesh to take a cornea transplant. This is also quite a chiddush because I don't know, we consider every blind person as if they're in a constant state of pekuach nefesh. Maybe, but, be careful. I don't know. Tzarchin. Okay, l'maisa. These are all big chedushim. Most poskim, including Rav Moshe, the Shevet Levi, the Minchas Yitzchak, and the Tzitz Eliezer, say that it is usher to take the cornea out of this Jewish mace and put it into this blind person. Now, as we discussed, the potential kula, based on the Gemara in Saita, we discussed that there's a kula in the Gemara in Saita when we were discussing that taking a branch from Arla and reattaching it to another tree, the Arla branch loses its shame of an Arla branch and gains the status of the tree at large, and it's batal, and therefore even fruit that grow from that branch don't have it in Arla. So they wanted to say the same thing would be true by kidneys, etc. Do we say that l'chumra? Now what's the case? Now the Metzius used to be that after a person died who had a pacemaker, they would take the pacemaker out of the body, and then they would use that pacemaker for another person that needed it. I guess pacemakers were very expensive, and all the poskim are talking and discussing whether or not you could take that pacemaker out of the body of the person that passed away. Now the Minchas Yitzchak says it's aser. No way, nothing to talk about. You cannot take that pacemaker out of the body. Why? It's batal. It's a chilik of the body. That pacemaker has a chiv kfura, just like any other part of the body. And if you did take it out, it's aser b'ana, because it's like a dead body. Ramosha says, if the way that it works is that you're going to have to return the pacemaker after you're done, then you're better off putting it on the outside of the body, not putting it on the inside of the body. And if the doctors say there's no way of putting it on the outside of the body, then b'di'evet, you could put it inside of the body. He wasn't very happy about this, but he was b'di'evet, he was mekel b'makom pekuach nefesh, but he was not very happy about this situation. Rav Shlomo Zalman, he said it's mutter. Why? Because as we discussed earlier, that the sheet of Rav Shlomo Zalman is nivel ames only applies to something that you wouldn't do to a live body. So like we said earlier, Rav Shlomo Zalman says there's no nivel ames by putting a body through an MRI machine and drawing blood or taking a biopsy, because that's something that's done normally to a live person. Obviously you need some need to do this. We're not just doing it. So too, when it comes to the pacemaker, it's normal. The life of a pacemaker is 10-15 years. So after 10-15 years, the person's alive, you take the pacemaker out and you replace it. So therefore, since it's a procedure that's normal to a live person, nivel ames does not apply. Additionally, in the Sefer Nishmas Avram, by the way, the Sefer Nishmas Avram is probably the most authoritative. Actually, I don't want to say that, you get in trouble. One of the very, very authoritative medical halacha svarim. It was written by some Dr. Talmud Chacham that had lots of sheikhs to the Gedolim. Spent a lot of time with Shlomo Zalman. It's Dr. Avram something. Steinberg, maybe? I don't remember what his name is. I remember it's Dr. Avram something. I think it was Avram or something like that. Something like that. I think it was Abraham, something like that. I don't know exactly. But Nishmas Avram, there's many volumes to it. So he wrote that, he quoted Rav Shlomo Zalman as saying that there's no chiv kfura and no isar no on the pacemaker, because it's b'chal not sheikh to consider something like that part of the guf. It's electric. It doesn't look like a body part. It's electric device. Something that's an electric device that doesn't look like it's part of the body cannot be considered part of the body. And once again, these are svaras. I can hear the svar, I can hear against the svar. It's hard for me to have a real opinion on this, but that's what Rav Shlomo Zalman felt. Obviously, Rav Moshe Feinstein and Minchas Yitzchak did not believe the svar. The Tzitz Eliezer, he was mater, and also he was very big in medical halacha as well. He was the famed posek of Shari Tzedek. So he was mater for two reasons. First of all, he was using the shita that we discussed earlier, that the isser of nivel ames for financial benefit only applies to the family. Over here, if the hospital wants it back, and then we're taking the Shechever Kadisha for the hospital is taking the pacemaker back, that's not financial gain for the family. That's the hospital wants their thing back, and therefore the Isser of Nivel Ames doesn't apply. Secondly, which is connected, that apparently the Metzias, I don't know if this is Metzias everywhere, but the hospital owned the pacemaker. So if the hospital lent the pacemaker to this mace, and now the mace gets buried with the pacemaker without returning the item that he borrowed, that's a bizoyin to the mace to get buried in a way without returning what you borrowed, and therefore memela you could return it. Lamesa, I checked it up a little bit. Now I did a little research. Nowadays, new pacemaker costs around $15,000. So I don't know what the old ones cost exactly, but this is not the minhag how it works. Nowadays, from Yidden get buried with the pacemaker inside. In the non-Jewish world, I saw that in America the rules are you cannot reuse a pacemaker in America. However, a lot of the goyim do get the pacemakers removed, and they get them donated to third world countries where they can't afford pacemakers, and they use the pacemakers there. Just thought that was interesting. What if somebody, an altruistic yid, decides that he wants his pacemaker to go to a third world country? What would we say? So the Chayra, based on the fact that the Minchas Yitzchak thought this was not cool, and Ramosha thought this was not cool, I would say that we would not allow him to do such a thing. It's one thing if you have a Pekuach Nefesh situation. Let's say you know a yid in that third world country. Okay, maybe. Then we have our old shaylas back. But if it's just you're altruistic, you want to give it to the third world country, that would be a problem. Besides, there may be other problems as well without getting involved in the sugya of giving gifts to goyim. That's a different discussion, but there might be additional issues. Interesting story, to break with the story for a second. The doctors told Ramosha that he needs a pacemaker. And Ramosha told the doctor, just give me a day I want to learn up a couple of things, give me a day to think about it. So the doctor said, all right, a day is not a problem. So Ramosha went, opened up his svarim, etc. The next day, Ramosha said, okay, I'm going to go with the surgery to get the pacemaker. Now, his children, Talmidim, I don't know exactly who it was, asked Ramosha, we're dealing with Pekuach Nefesh here. Like, what was your shayla? What were you doing? So Ramosha said, even though everybody knows Ramosha was a big anav, but Ramosha said, Tachas, if Mashiach comes today, I'll probably be the Rosh Sanhedrin. And the Rosh Sanhedrin is not allowed to have a mum. So I wanted to learn the sugya to see if getting a pacemaker, I want to review the surgery again, and then review the sugyas again, because if I want to make sure that getting a pacemaker wouldn't make me a Baal Mum, so I'll still be capable and able to be the Rosh Sanhedrin if Mashiach will come. Which shows you just a murdika thing. Ramosha was a major anav, but he still knew good and well who he was. So I had a Geshmaka story. Okay. Now, Lamaisa. Nowadays, we don't need the pacemaker, as we said. Now, here's the question that we could stop for a second to think about as well. When you separate a body part from somebody, is that body part considered a dead thing, or is it considered part of the body? And let me explain. Let's say there was somebody who's a kohen. Yeah? There's a concept of getting fingers donated and attached to this person. Now, if he's a kohen, you can't get tummy dika fingers. They're mace. He's not allowed to touch it. So there's a Tzis Eliezer has a Mardei Chiddush, where he wants to say he's working with the Mishnah in Arla, that Gemara in Saita discussing the case of Arla that we discussed earlier, and he says that dead body part becomes part of the kohen, and it becomes part of his body. But then he has the kasha on himself. That's great after it's attached. What about the second that it touches the body before it's properly sewn in? He has a murdik chiddush. I don't know. I mean, it's like scary to say such a chiddush. He has like a kol ha'omed type chiddush. Kol ha'omed to be connected is as if it's already connected and it's not a problem for the kohen. And he has a similar tshuva of Nebuch, some girl that was born without fingers, and they wanted to use some toes or something like that to connect mucking fingers, and it was a bas kohen. And there was a question, same type of question, could you have these seemingly dead body parts after you disconnect them in the house of the kohen? And he said the same basic chiddush, that would be allowed. We now consider that part of the new being. Okay, I think we're going to end here, maybe because we don't have time to go through the next part of the sugya, which is the big part, which is going to discuss whether when taking away that heart or kidney from this donor, do they actually have to kill the donor to take away the heart and kidney? Is there an issue of ritzicha, or do we consider halachically that the person is already dead when we take it? Modern medicine considers that person, once they're brain dead, to be already dead. We'll discuss how we view that person in halacha, because obviously there may be heterim to override nivel ames, kfuras ames, hanas ames, but there's going to be no heterim to override the isser ritzicha in order to get those body parts. And furthermore, we're going to discuss, even if that is an issue, next week in Mitzvah to discuss whether you could take the body parts from goyim, and that will be a whole discussion. Looking forward. Thank you for joining me.